Hello, friends. It is an absolute delight to be able to share this conversation with you. Dr. David Hamilton is not only an incredibly wise teacher of our times, but I am also honoured to be able to call him my friend. After completing his PhD in organic chemistry, David worked in the pharmaceutical industry, developing drugs for cardiovascular disease and cancer. Inspired by the placebo effect in drug trials, he began to research the mind-body connection and eventually left the industry to write books and educate people on how to understand and harness their minds and emotions to benefit their health. He is now author of 10 books, including The 5 Side Effects of Kindness and How Your Mind Can Heal Your Body. He is a columnist, speaker, and is featured in the Netflix documentary Heal. I just know you're going to enjoy and benefit from this conversation as much as I have. David Hamilton, welcome and thank you so much for joining me.
It's my absolute pleasure, Bronnie. I always love chatting with you, so this is so exciting.
It is exciting, isn't it? Yeah, let's hope it's exciting for the listeners as well.
I hope so. I hope so.
So what I'd like to start with is when I am teaching my own teachings to my audience about regret-free living, a lot of that is about surrender and being present for your life, taking one step at a time and trusting in each step as it comes out, as it evolves. So I'm curious about your own beginning, not in the sense of whether it was sunny or raining on the day you were born or what your favorite food was as a toddler, though I'm sure that's all interesting enough. But, but what I'm wondering is what brought someone with a PhD in organic chemistry to becoming a global teacher in kindness? How, was there a defining moment, or was it just a step-by-step process?
I would say a bit of both, and actually I love what you said there about surrender, because me doing what I do now arose out of me surrendering to an impulse that had been growing inside me for, I guess, many, many years. I even remember during my PhD, there was little times when my research wasn't going well. You know, when you're doing lab research, it's like anything, it goes up and down and up and down. And during some of the down points, I remember fantasizing about being an author, about writing books. But yeah, I had failed my English at school. And the idea, if I was at school, and the idea of me ever writing, it would be, what? Me, writer? But I started to feel these really strong impulses during my PhD of being a writer and a teacher, and I kind of just put it aside. And I remember while I worked in the pharmaceutical industry, I'd been building, this impulse was always there, and I just used to just push it down because I have a real job now. I'm a professional, I'm a scientist, and this is my career. And, you know, I was getting all these opportunities in the company. I kept pushing it down, but yet growing inside me was this impulse. And then I started to get more involved in a part of my job that gave me exposure to the placebo effect and the large amounts of people who improve on medical trials on placebos, so sugar tablets. And I thought, this is so amazing, and it's so in line with this growing impulse of what I felt I wanted to teach and share, which was about, you know, kindness and compassion and the mind and anything to do with consciousness. And here I was being shown data on it. And I think it was just gradually growing. And I remember once I was on a seminar, you know, I'd been in the company about, I don't know, 4 years or something. And I was in a seminar led by Tony Robbins, the big American motivational speaker. And he was talking about, you know, thinking about times in your life when you made a choice. And if you hadn't made that choice, your life would have gone in a different direction. And he said, now make a choice that will change the course of your life. And I remember it so clearly that I just decided to let go and to stop resisting the impulse I'd grown, and it all just came to the surface of what I believed I had was my thing, my purpose in life. And I just declared to one of my friends who was at the seminar, I'm handing my notice in, I'm leaving the job, and I'm going to write books and teach. And that was it. It was just a case of, letting go, really just letting go of all the preconceived ideas I had about what a scientist is and what a real professional job is, and the traditional career path from PhD to researcher, blah, 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 blah. And I had to just let it all go and embrace that which was natural inside of me, which was to write and to teach. And I've never looked back, really.
That's interesting, really interesting that you say that, because I think when you've invested that much time as well into your studies, there is that traditional path. Well, if I go start writing books, I may not use all I've learned, or it may turn out being a waste of my time. But what I've found is no skills in life are ever wasted. And if we have the courage to do exactly what you did and just take that one step at a time, you actually find all of these other skills support you ongoing.
Absolutely.
And I didn't like English much at school either. I was into mathematics full on. I loved numbers. And
same as me.
yeah, great. And look at us, here we are, both authors. Yeah, that's exactly it. You don't know, but you've got to have the courage to take that step and answer that niggling feeling that is there. And I think I wrote the same book review for about 5 years in a row, because I had a different English teacher each year, and we'd have to read a book and write a review. And so I just copied and pasted. Well, it wasn't copy and paste in those days, it was handwritten. But I was so not into English that I just wrote the same review and handed it in to a new teacher every single year. And I think I wrote the first one in year 6, like in primary school, and I was still writing the same review when I was almost graduating from high school. So, so we don't always know, but I did have pen friends all over the world. And so there was that freedom of writing that can call us. So now you've gone from that and you have 10 books and and you're in the middle of another one. As well as now also studying for your second PhD?
No, I'm doing it's an honours degree. So I'm doing another BSc basically in mathematics and physics. Just, but again, it's surrendering. Now, here it's interesting how we've started this conversation, Bronnie, because the reason why I'm doing, the prime reason why I'm doing this degree is, again, it was a growing impulse that I needed to formally study mathematics. And I was having some dreams that were, that were unsettling and like nightmares, but not classic nightmares where you're being chased. But I kept having this recurring dream every 3 or 4 months for a couple of years. And it was the same dream. I was coming to the end of the term and I hadn't done my maths. And there was a maths class, there was people in it, there was a teacher, and I was just so breezy. I just was coming in, I hadn't done my maths study, I hadn't done anything at all. And I was coming to this point in time, the end of the term, where I needed to do my maths. And I was starting to feel, I would wake up feeling like really unsettled, like agitated, like taking me a while to get out of the dream. Like, I've not done my maths, and I started to, over a couple of years, I eventually began to have this really strong impulse. I bought a university mathematics textbook. I bought another one, a third year, final year university one on Einstein's relativity theories, and I loved it. And I thought, I have to formally, I know I'm supposed to let go of any resistance and formally study it. So I registered for a university degree. Obviously, I would only have time to do it part-time. So it's 6 years, proper formal university degree, but I'm doing it part-time. So I'm doing it, rather than 3 years, I'm doing it in 6. I'm halfway through right now. But again, it was part of letting go and just surrendering to that inner impulse. And I know that the mathematics and physics has a big role to play in the type of books that I write, because I've wanted to touch on things like quantum mechanics and relativity as part of the way I present certain topics around consciousness and reality and the mind, but I never felt I understood the subject intuitively deep enough. And I would never want to misrepresent the science. So I've always kind of just touched on it, but stayed away from it. And I thought, well, I understand now if I formally study it, then I will be able to communicate. If I have to go into that subject area in some of my writings, I will be able to communicate it from a deep knowledge and intuitive understanding of it. So again, it was about surrendering, to letting go of any resistance and trusting what I feel inside I'm supposed to do.
And especially when life is kept giving you the dream, like, you know, hello, you're missing out. Maps are still waiting for you. And
and if I didn't do it by this particular point in time, it was never going to happen. So it was like there was a time on the dream. I was coming closer and closer to the end of the term. And the moment I surrendered and started to do the study, the dream went. I've not had the dream for 2.5 years.
Yes. And when we do that, and when we actually honor that calling, if it's come through a dream, then you're actually bringing a gift to the world. By honoring, having the courage to honor what is niggling at you, you do actually then bring a gift to the world. And in your case, what I've found is one of your greatest strengths is translating these fascinating fields of science into everyday language, where people who may not want to know every single detail about an atom or, you know, quantum physics on the levels that you grasp it, but they're curious and curious in how it all comes together and its relationship to what it looks like everyday life. That is one of your strengths. And so now that you've come from the chemistry side of it, now you're coming into it from the mathematics and physics side of it. I can't wait to read how you are going to interpret that and represent it.
Yeah, me too. I've not. It's beginning to. I feel I'm beginning to knit some of the more abstract science with the spirituality in a way that I've not perceived that depth before. You know, I can feel it almost, that how science, abstract science, and spirituality are now. I feel it. You know, again, like this impulse. You feel the impulse before you do it, and I can feel the fusion of abstract science with spirituality in a way that I've never experienced before. So I know that this is why I'm doing this now, so that I can grasp that fusion of science and spirituality from a deeper perspective. And ultimately, I think that affects who I am and how I communicate and how I do the things that I do. And I think that's much of life about, isn't it? You have a new experience, and that adds to that which you are, and it changes things a little bit. So you meet life, and you meet the world, and you meet your responsibilities in a slightly different way from before. So I suppose it's just an aspect of growth, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, and that science and spirituality, it's all coming from the same source anyway. And
yeah, absolutely.
So in the old days, science was very much a closed industry, and spirituality was a very closed industry. One was run by the hierarchy of the church, and then there were qualified scientists, and never would they come together. But we're in a place now where humanity is evolving and ready for this merge, the merger, which has always been there in the grand scheme of things, but for us to actually recognize that and accept that, oh, hang on a sec, these are all merging and linking, and it's voices like yours that will help the two sides meet and actually understand, hang on a sec, this is the same, this is real. But for those who have the analytical mind that need the proof and need the backing of why some things work and why, and so, say for example, in one of your great strengths is the mind-body connection. So a lot of people in the spiritual world would just look at it as visualizing and manifesting and that sort of thing. And then in the scientific world, you can look at it as the placebo effect. And but now with a voice like yours coming into it, people are actually seeing, scientists are seeing, okay, this overlaps, and this is exactly what that other crowd is saying. And so for those, I mean, most people have heard about what the placebo effect is, but can you just explain it in in your own terms
Yeah.
and how it relates to your work?
Yeah, well, it really comes down to the fact when you believe something. So eh, I, let's say I was about to take a little white tablet because I've got a headache, and it's in the same pack that I normally take it out of. But what I don't know is that someone has secretly swapped that tablet for a placebo. And let's say I've got a really sore head, a really bad headache, but I take that tablet assuming it's a real drug, but it's a placebo. About
Meaning it's just like
70%,
a sugar pill or
it's
something
just a
like that.
sugar
Yeah,
pill, yes, so
yeah,
there's nothing in it.
yeah.
About 70% of the time, my headache will completely go to the same degree as it would have done had it been an actual real painkiller. And, and, and so that's the placebo effect. But the real beauty of it is many people will assume that the pain isn't gone away, you just think it's gone away. But in actual fact, when you look at a scan of the brain, the fact that I believe that that is a real tablet, my brain will then have produced natural painkillers because I believed. So my belief will have produced natural painkillers. So in the painkilling context, my brain would have produced its own natural version of morphine to deliver the quality of pain reduction that I believed was about to happen. So what happens with the placebo effect is you believing something cause your brain to manufacture these substances necessary to deliver to you exactly what you believe is supposed to happen. So what you have is a really profound intersection between your mind and your body. And in many ways, the body moves and shapes, and its internal biochemistry is constantly moving and shaping in response to where your mind is. And that is actually what really got me into a subject I write a lot about now, kindness, because it's the same with kindness. When you do something kind for someone, it's how that makes you feel. And that feeling associated, the feelings induced by kindness or even compassion or even gratitude cause this disturbance in your internal biochemistry. And it alters it in such a way. For kindness, it produces lots of beneficial effects on your heart, it lifts the immune system in lots of different ways. And so the whole subject of placebo effect, visualization, neuroscience, kindness, it's all the same version, it's all different aspects of the same thing that come down to this fusion between your mind and your body. It's what you think, what you feel, and what you believe causes this alteration in your internal biochemistry. It's fascinating, really. I love it.
Yeah, I can see that, and so do I. I love hearing it from your expression. So that also works in the opposite way, where you're saying about when you're feeling, when you've been kind to someone, how it creates all this great stuff going on inside and helps build up your immunity. But if you're unkind to someone and you're feeling ashamed of your behavior, or you're feeling guilty or remorseful, then it's doing the same. It's doing the opposite. It's causing problems within your body.
It's not exactly doing the opposite. What's interesting is we're genetically wired for compassion and kindness. We have a large portion of the nervous system that's actually referred to as the caretaking nerve, and it evolved in response to parents looking after their children. I mean, if you track back evolutionary times, humans have much larger heads when they're born than many other animals. And what that means is human babies are technically born premature compared to other animal species. And so where many animals are up and they're walking about within a few days, humans need cared for by their parents for 9 months, 10 months, a year, a couple of years, because we're technically immature, premature relative to other animals. So throughout millions of years of evolution, what's happened then is humans have evolved a portion of the nervous system that responds to care and compassion. So we actually have the caretaking nerve, and it's stimulated by compassion. Similarly, kindness and that sense of kindness itself, the genes that produce hormones induced by kindness are almost 500 million years old. Some of the oldest in the human genome. So we actually have a bias towards kindness, compassion, and positive emotion, which is far stronger. And what that means is there are chemical products associated with compassion and kindness, but the products of the opposites are not the same. So the opposites really just produce a stress effect. So what we say is, when you're being unkind, it's not necessarily that you're producing a substance that's equal in strength to the effects of compassion and kindness. All we actually do is we reduce the positive effects of compassion and kindness and elevate stress a little bit. But there's not a singularly powerful effect of it. It's really just the stress response. Similarly with feelings of shame, what really just doing is we're activating stress effects and in slightly different ways in the body, but they're not as powerful as the effects of, you know, compassion and kindness and these positive things. And I think that's a lovely way for us humans to be, that we're genetically wired for compassion and kindness, so the effects are actually stronger and than the other ones.
That's fascinating, and a bit of a relief as well,
Yeah.
because I think it's really easy for people to really beat themselves up when they've been unkind, or when they've been human and made mistakes, and not necessarily delivered their expression in the way that they had hoped, whether that's triggered by old conditioning or fear in the moment or whatever it is. So I think that especially when, in terms of this, the whole creating your life through manifesting and the power of your mind, it's very easy to think, okay, I've done all this really good work here. I've been kind. I've done a lot of good in the world, but then I've really, really messed up in this way. That's undone all the good work. But what you're saying is, it hasn't actually undone all the good work, because the bad is not as powerful as the good.
Absolutely. And that's what. It is great.
Oh, thank goodness.
Because you said it, Bronnie, we're all human, aren't we? We all make mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's how we learn. It's a part of it.
It's how we learn. But the chemical effects of these kind of things is really just little alteration, just really versions of stress, really. So whereas the chemical versions of compassion and kindness they actually have a specific function and specific benefits in the body, which are much, much stronger.
So I'm curious whether, I don't know if this can be answered or not, but I'm curious whether kindness to self is as powerful as kindness to others in terms of the benefits to the body.
Yeah, it can be, and it's highly important. I guess it's slightly different between people, because it really depends how you feel about yourself. So people who, for example, and I know I speak from experience, people who lack self-love or self-compassion or self-esteem, and I wrote a book called, as you know, called I Heart Me, The Science of Self-Love, and I really wrote it because I needed to learn self-love. And how I define self-love is as an inner sense of your own worthiness and value. And I had lacked that for most of my adult life, but just pretended to people that I didn't. And I just sort of got by. And so I wrote that book about 6 years ago almost, in response to really just as a treatment for myself. I needed to learn the subject. And so for when you find yourself lacking in an inner sense of worthiness and value, self-kindness and self-compassion is vitally important. It's very, very important. And it's not necessarily about going out and treating yourself to a little gift here, a present. That is very, very important. But what is equally, if not more important, is finding some way of recognizing your value and doing it. So sometimes finding what matters most to you and doing or being more of that. So for example, me listening to that inner sense that I had to be a writer. So self-love would be saying, okay, that is my sense of purpose. I believe that gives me a sense of meaning and value. So part of me loving myself, having compassion on myself, is surrendering to that impulse and being and doing that. So self-compassion and self-love is vitally important, in proportion to how much a person is struggling with their own self-love. But as you build your self-love, then it becomes easier to give to others, because you're unhindered by this need for things. Not that we don't need it. I mean, I have to continually remind myself of the importance of self-kindness and self-love. And one of my big challenges is learning to say no sometimes, and also getting really, really busy with things, and then having to step back and say, I need to do something that recognizes my own inner value. And as long as I keep doing all these other things, then I'm not surrendering to that need to recognize my own value. So it's like a constant check on yourself. But it's as you say, it's so vitally important, self-love, self-compassion.
Yeah, I think it's also, as well as taking those actions, like creating those boundaries, and that is definitely an act of self-love. I've learned that one the hard way, but I feel I've mastered it really well. And those who know me well say the same, that they wish they had the strength to create such healthy boundaries. But we have to learn the hard way sometimes, and it took me a long time to learn that. But I also feel that a part of the self-love and self-compassion is having mindfulness in the sense of becoming an observer of your thoughts, so that inner dialogue, where you gave the example of go out and do, it's not necessarily go out and do lots of physical things for yourself. It might be more about being kinder and setting those boundaries. So for me, on my journey with self-love and self-compassion, it's been a lot about what I learned through the meditation path, through the Buddhist path, in becoming an observer of my thoughts and realizing, okay, the thoughts I'm having now are actually a product, possibly a product from my environment and my upbringing. They're not myself, but I am going to stop them in their tracks. And I've found that meditation, I'm a long-term meditator now, about 30 years. And I've found that meditation has helped me actually catch myself. And that is such a gift of freedom when you can do that. And it doesn't mean that every time I have a negative thought about myself, or I beat myself up if I've done something or spoken in a way I wish I hadn't. Those patterns, there's so many layers to heal. We're always healing new layers. But every single time I can catch myself and be mindful of the conversation, the inner dialogue that's going on, to me, that's an act of self-compassion and self-kindness, because it's like, oh, hang on a sec. You're actually a good person. You're trying your best. You come with the right intentions. That's enough. Just give yourself a break here.
That's a wonderful example, and even a definition and demonstration of self-compassion and self-kindness. Just literally being mindful and present to your own thinking, but being able to recognize your own humanness and take a step back. Because I think it's when we let these thoughts go wild without exploring them, that's when it gets out of hand. So I love how you're continually coming back from a space of self-compassion and self-kindness, and just releasing these little, negative thoughts and ideas that can be catastrophic sometimes if we let them get too strong a hold. And
and they will if we let them.
Yeah. I love that, Bronnie.
Oh, my pleasure. So in this time we're in at the moment, people who are listening or watching this conversation, if they're watching it straight away, we're in the time of COVID-19, and just before we came on to record, you and I both said you're in Scotland, I'm in Australia. We're living under very similar restrictions at the moment. We're allowed out to exercise, we're allowed out for essentials, but that's it. And so the rest of the time we're home based, and there's a lot of fear running crazy in the country. There's a lot of sadness, a lot of loss, but there's also a lot of gentleness, and there's a slowing down that is actually suiting a lot more people than perhaps than those who dare to admit it. But this conversation may also be heard from other people in 6 months or a year or a few years' time. So it doesn't necessarily only apply to this chapter of the coronavirus, COVID-19. But what I would like to know then is, what's your opinion here? Because with all of this that's going on, what I'm noticing is an elevation of kindness, where neighbours have never had a conversation with each other, or maybe said hello once every 10 years. They're now looking out for each other. And I've had a phone call from a great woman who, my creative journey started in 1998 when I was selling photos with inspirational things I'd written, and she was selling her pottery beside me at the markets. We both had a stall at a market. We were never really close friends or anything like that, but we got into the habit of sending each other a Christmas card. And 22 years later, we still send each other a Christmas card. Last week, she just rang up and we had our first phone conversation in our life. And it was very natural and easy and catching up, and it was just one small example of a lot of things. I've picked up the phone and checked in on a few different friends who I might normally text or email, and I just see this elevation of kindness going on globally, which is so beautiful and so refreshing. So from your perspective, I'm curious, because obviously we all need to have a stronger immune system now with this virus going around the world. And so I think it's quite fascinating that, I mean, these are linked, aren't they? Because kindness is elevating and we need our immune systems to be elevating, and just how wonderfully life is, or how wonderful humanity is, in the sense that we need our immune system lifted. We can't be going out and having parties and doing a lot of the things that may normally lift our immune systems or make them stronger. And yet this elevation of kindness is going on, and that's going on a global scale. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm just curious about your take on that, David.
Yeah, I think, and when you look back at history, humanity often, we make progress and then we make a giant leap. And sometimes, depending on what's happened, there's a giant leap as things get reorganized. Like after the Great Wars and all that, there's a reorganization, a coming together. Like the European Union really began in response to the fractures after the Second World War. So you have these things, these giant leaps. And I think we're undergoing a giant leap right now. A giant leap in compassion and kindness on a scale global, you've said, Bronnie, on a scale that we've never recognized before. And I think the result of that will be a breaking down of artificial walls that we erect between each other, but also between nations. You know, and systems in the world when all countries come together to solve common problems. So there'll be stronger, I think we're going to see globally, stronger ties between nations, and you know, dissolving of artificial walls and barriers. We don't need more walls. We need to tear them all down. We need to come together, and that's what we're doing individually, but it's happening globally as well. I've never seen so much compassion and kindness. Like, I was so inspired by you talking about that conversation with your friend, because one of the things I've noticed is you pass someone in the street or you're on the phone to someone, and we often say, just as a greeting, "Oh, hi, how are you?" But we don't often really mean the "how are you." It's just a greeting, like hello kind of thing. But now when we say "how are you," we really mean it. I mean, we really mean, how are you? I want to know that you're, not just how you are, I want to know that you're safe and you're well. And so there's an outpouring of compassion. But here's how it affects the immune system. As we elevate in our kindness, the immune system responds in two different ways. One is typically stress and background stress suppress the immune system. So we release that background stress and elevate it. But on its own, kindness impacts different strands of the immune system. One way that kindness affects is affectionately known as the Mother Teresa effect. And it was out of a scientific study that had people watch a video of Mother Teresa on the streets of Calcutta carrying out acts of compassion and kindness. And they monitored a very important immune system antibody that's in our saliva, it's in our lines of mucous membranes, very, very important part of the immune system. And it's called SIGA, or secretory immunoglobulin A. There's a big fancy word. It really is just the first part of the immune system that any virus meets. So if, for example, you have virus, you inhale it through breathing, someone sneezed, or you have it on your hands, the first part of the immune system that meets is secretory immunoglobulin A, this little antibody. So it's very, very important. Now, what they found is just by watching Mother Teresa showing compassion and kindness, and therefore feeling that elevated state themselves, their levels of SIGA increased by 50%. Not just a little bit, 50% increase in SIGA levels simply by that elevated state of watching someone carry out an act of compassion and kindness. We get the same effects when we are the ones giving the compassion and kindness, whether we're giving them, receiving them, or observing them. It's that feeling, elevated feeling, induced by the participation in or the observation of kindness that has this incredible effect on that immune system antibody. It's amazing, really. It's astonishing, actually. It's like globally, we're doing one of the things intuitively, i.e. kindness, that we know we need to do to maybe potentially reduce some of the impact of the coronavirus, whether we're doing it subconsciously or it's just releasing our natural nature. But this is our nature anyway, to care for each other. But the nice side effect of it is we are having this effect on our, or on that portion of the immune system in such a way that we're supporting our natural immune function.
Yeah, I don't think globally we could have done it as consciously as it's happened naturally.
No.
I think that perhaps it's just that primal instinct when a baby knows how to feed as soon as it comes into the world. Maybe it's just something in so deep within our soul, within our genetics, that we need our immune system built, and somewhere within us it says, okay, let's do it this way. Because I agree, where the walls are coming down, and
Yeah.
The virus is just the disguise of what is really happening here. And it may take a few years after we all come out of isolation before the true effects of this time are fully revealed. I can't even forecast how long it may take. I imagine there will be some things that will be immediate, and there will be other things that reveal themselves in the coming years. And it's actually a really exciting time, because we don't need those walls all around us. It is indeed a global shift. It is an elevation of consciousness, and it's been a long time coming. I know that there's plenty of people like us who have been living a certain way and using as much courage as we can to live in a way that is a little bit outside of the system, but at the same time having to fit within the system in certain ways. And in doing so, it just feels like a lack of authenticity. It has been for me. That I've been teaching about slow living and simple living for a lot of years now, because that's what makes the most sense to me. And now that everybody has to do the same, I just feel so at home and relieved. I don't feel like I'm the odd one out who really has to put in so much effort to keep those boundaries, to live at a pace that actually makes sense to me. Now, globally, we're being reminded, actually, there's more important things here that are going on here. Relationships and connection and wellness and the flowers blooming and, lots of beautiful things like that.
It's like we're all getting back to simpler practices, and even simpler practices how we lead our lives, but also I notice a lot of people becoming more conscious of waste, like not wasting food, and being more care over how you're impacting the environment. Many things that we've always wanted to change that are involved in a simpler way of living, and more preserving, the planet, etc. All of these things are happening now at an accelerated pace as we respond to what's happening. I understand what you mean. I've had this call for a long time to simplify how I'm doing things, and now I have no choice.
That's right.
Yeah. And so I'm saying, okay, what am I being asked to do here? And I'm responding to that inner need, that inner impulse, like I've had before, that surrendering, that letting go, and as a consequence, yielding to certain things and letting go of some things, and embracing, things that have meaning for me, but in a much more simplified way from how I might have been in the past.
Something I say to my audience around this sometimes is just trust in life, that life knows our needs so much better than we do ourselves. And so on a global scale, who'd have thought it would just be this virus, a virus, you know, would be the catalyst for this global shift. We had the fires here in Australia, and that just changed so much about the consciousness of my country, and helped a lot of people actually realize the value of what we have here in terms of beauty and natural beauty in the country. But life knew that the only thing that could get us all together would be a virus. It wasn't just, okay, let's put an earthquake on every country, or let's set off volcanoes all around the world. It's like, let's do something that can spread so that it gets to every single country, or most countries around the world, so that everyone actually comes together. And I think from that perspective, it really helps to learn to surrender and trust, because we can spend so much time working out how something is going to unfold, and it doesn't always, it can hinder the process rather than help it. We still have to take action and everything else, but if we can learn to do it one step at a time, like you, I'm coming the full circle here, I've just realized, but with your curiosity around the placebo effect, and then just one step at a time led to the book, led to this, led to that, and then it brings you into who you're supposed to be. And I think that this amazing shift that we're going through, this is a wonderful time, despite the heartache, the loss, and everything else. We can't have, everything has contrast, and I wholeheartedly believe that on the other side of this, we are going to be a much better species, and in much more alignment with each other and with the planet.
I totally agree with you, Bronnie. This is I guess on some levels it's a spiritual calling to us as a single species, as a single, you know, we're all brothers and sisters, really, in the deepest possible way. And I think this is one of the aspects of this, is us recognizing that, but not just intellectually recognizing that, but feeling that. Like you really, we had this, we've chatted before we started this formal conversation, but you really care about the people that are suffering, and you really care about the people who are scared, and we care about the people who are anxious, and you care about the people who are safe, but you still care about them because you're worried in case they're not safe. And so we're all feeling compassion and love in a way that we haven't done before, and we're recognizing on a deeper level that we're all members of the same family, and we've got to look out for all of us, and we need to knock down these artificial walls and divisions, and we're feeling that, and we're coming together in a way that hasn't really happened before in any you know, in your life or my life, certainly so far.
Absolutely. So David, we might wind it up there, because it's just such a beautiful way to finish, you know, speaking about this global unity. Is there anything that any last word that you'd like to leave for the audience, for the listening or viewing audience? Any departing words of wisdom? No pressure.
Well, actually, one thing I've been saying quite a lot is the most contagious thing on the planet is kindness. The most contagious thing. You know, so the scientists measure the contagion factor of things. It's called R0, or, you know, like rate, alpha rate, or RT, meaning rate of transmission. Or you could call it the contagion rate or contagion factor. For the coronavirus, it varies from place to place, but on average, it's about 2.5. Kindness is about 5. It's double. But here's where it really gets interesting, because what 2.5 means for coronavirus is one person will typically infect 2.5 people. And that's at one stage. At the next stage, those 2.5 will infect 2.5. And then at the next stage, those will affect 2.5. And what you get after 3 stages is about 16 people at 3 stages have been affected by one person with coronavirus. So 3 levels of transmission. Now look at kindness. 5 people at one stage infect another 5 at 2 stages, but now we're on to 25. But those 25 infect another 5 at 3 stages, which is 125. So 3 stages of infection of coronavirus is 16. 3 stages of infection of kindness is 125. And so coronavirus goes like that. Kindness goes like that, much, much faster. And that's why kindness and compassion is in every single household. Coronavirus isn't, because kindness is far, far more contagious. We just tend not to notice it. And that contagion factor of kindness has been demonstrated scientifically. It's been calculated and measured. So it is. So I'd like to leave people with that. The most contagious thing is kindness. It's far more contagious than the coronavirus. So have faith in our common humanity, have faith in our compassion and kindness to ultimately provide solutions ongoing to this crisis.
You're a wise human being, Dr. David Hamilton.
As are you, Bronnie.
Where will people find you? Because I know that there are going to be people who may not know your work yet, but where can they find you to learn even more from you?
Well, my website, drdavidhamilton.com. And I'm active on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. All my handles are on my website as well. So drdavidhamilton.com is probably the easiest thing, or just search for me on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Okay. And I put lots of videos about kindness and all that on my social media, and I write little blogs and stuff as well. So
fantastic. Fantastic. Well, David, thank you so much. This has just been such a delightful conversation, and I'm feeling really inspired, and I've no doubt that our listeners are as well. So thank you for your time and wisdom.
Well, thank you, Bronnie. It's been a lovely conversation for me. This is still early in the morning for me in Scotland, so this has set me up for the day. It's a lovely conversation.
And the sun has set while we've had our conversation, so I'm going into my evening with so much joy and love in my heart.
Yeah, oh, lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in today. I am Bronnie Ware. I am the author of The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. To find out more about regret-free living and be taught by the most recognised teacher on the subject on the planet, please visit my own website, bronnieware.com.